Good morning, everybody. This is a live severe weather briefing. As we have a lot to talk about, we've got a Tropical Depression Eta that has moved over the Western Caribbean. Convective explosion there just on the southeast side of the center. It does look like it's battling just a little bit of northerly wind shear with a lot of that convection displaced just to the southeast of where the center is indicated. But it does look like the center may be just a little bit further south as well. Than indicated by the National Hurricane Center, and it is expected to be Tropical Storm Eta by the next advisory, by the 11 a.m. advisory. In fact, it's expected to have 40-mile-an-hour max sustained winds. The minimum pressure here is 1,008 millibars, but I'm wondering if that center might be just a little bit further to the southeast. You can really see that convective explosion, hot tower here developing. It actually has a east to west type orientation, which would tell me that the center of Tropical Depression Eta is a little bit off to the south. It also is possible, though, that the low-level center is further north as compared to the convection, showing a bit of a tilted system. Nevertheless, though, Eta is expected to continue rapidly off to the northeast. Here you can see its complex track making landfall across northeastern Nicaragua as a Category 4 storm. We were watching that very closely. Had the dreaded pinhole eye there as it was dropping southwest. Thankfully, that storm went a little further south than it was anticipated, which brought up Puerto Cabezas out of the northern eye wall, or else there would have been deadly winds, a deadly storm surge there. There still was dangerous mudslides, flash flooding, and those hurricane force winds in that community. And those communities to the south of Puerto Cabezas were absolutely ravaged by a life-threatening storm surge down there. And I'm definitely considering intercept of a potential low-end Hurricane Eta as it impacts South Florida. Looks like those impacts could arrive as early as Sunday night up in the Florida Keys. Here is the official Hurricane Center forecast track on the Radar Omega app, passing it over central Cuba, well to the east of Havana, and then initiating this westward turn as an upper-level low is traversing the southern Gulf Coast, and that's going to complicate the forecast track here of Eta. Most of the models show it reemerging across the eastern Gulf of Mexico, meandering for a few days, and then about the middle portion of next week, it does a northeastward turn and could head up toward the Tampa area as a high-end tropical storm, maybe even a low-end hurricane. Some of those intensity models are showing an intensification into a low-end hurricane. Nevertheless, though, we're going to have storm surge impacts, big-time rain, tornado threat, tornado threat, water spouts coming ashore here along the South Florida coastline, and that's going to begin as early as Sunday night. The National Hurricane Center has the position of Tropical Storm Eta over the Keys at 6 a.m. Monday, and Mike Tice and the HERV, they're already in Isla Morada. He's awaiting the birth of his first child there in the Upper Keys. He's a little bit concerned that there could be some theory behind low pressure inducing labor very close to the due date of his first child. So that's definitely on the mind of Mike Tice down there. But I'm likely going to fly into South Florida on Sunday to intercept this storm Monday morning down in the Florida Keys, and then head up the western coast of Florida and await intercept of Eta again when it turns off to the northeast. But all of it depends on the evolution of that upper level low across South Florida, and we're going to go over that next. But first, I want to show you the official National Hurricane Center forecast track. This is the latest, hot off the press. We've got tropical storm warnings down here, tropical storm watches for much of Cuba, central and western Cuba, including the Isle of Youth out there. It is possible that these are warnings now. Let me take a look and see what we got going on here for Cuba. And it still is a tropical depression, forecast to be a tropical storm by the next one, and that's actually a tropical storm watch there in yellow for much of central and western Cuba. I assume, though, that that's going to be upgraded to a tropical storm warning shortly. And this forecast track has been meandering quite a bit. In general, it shows a rapid lift off to the northeast as Tropical Storm Eta is organizing. It's then going to move over land in Cuba, which could cause it to take a hit, but then emerges over the warmer waters here to the west of the Bahamas and over the Florida Strait, and that's when it's expected to put on the brakes, do a northwestward turn with the arrival of this upper level low, the arrival of the influence of that upper level low across the central Gulf Coast, that's going to lead to a turn back to the northwest, crossing the central Florida Keys on Monday morning, and then re-emerging across the eastern Gulf of Mexico, where water temperatures are still pretty warm out there, especially in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, down closer to the Keys and the southwestern coast of Florida. Pretty warm water temperatures out there, and this is expected to turn off to the northeast, potentially coming in somewhere across northwest Florida, maybe the Tampa Bay area. We're likely going to deploy surgeonator sensors across the west coast of Florida ahead of Eta. And right now, the official intensity forecast from the National Hurricane Center has a high-end tropical storm as it's influencing South Florida and the west coast there, potentially being a low-end hurricane. But still, right now, the official National Hurricane Center forecast is calling for a high-end tropical storm. And so now let's look at the Pivotal Weather website. This is the 6C GFS model, and I'm going to show you the players that are going to influence the evolution of Eta. Here is this upper level low. This is over the lower Mississippi River Valley as of this morning, and this is expected to push off to the east. And eventually the steering currents ahead of this upper level low are going to bend Eta back to the northwest across the Florida Keys, potentially impacting the west coast of Florida out there. And definitely could be some storm surge impacts across the west coast of Florida. I'm actually getting messages right now from Mark as we're downloading that final Surgeonator data. We do have preliminary data from Surgeonator 2 out near the Buras area that showed a double-digit storm surge there in Plaquemine Parish, 10 to 15 feet. We still need to assess the final storm surge depth using the salinity and the base atmospheric pressure curve that we have for the Buras area. But we're starting to get in that new data as I'm also prepping the sensors to be deployed ahead of Hurricane Eta in a network there across western and southern Florida. I've even been discussing with Mike the possibility of taking a boat out to a very small island off the south coast of Florida and deploying a Surgeonator sensor and a windy palm sensor up there. But that plan is still being honed. Here's the upper level trough that's coming into the Pacific Northwest. Winter storm warnings are in effect for the Sierra Nevadas ahead of the system, thankfully. Getting some snow and some moisture to begin the winter season out there. Also, big winter storm watches across Montana. Winter storm watches as well across the San Juans of Colorado ahead of that system. And let's go ahead to 12 hours. This is during midday today. See the evolution of this trough. Big time intensifying trough as it's coming into the west coast of the U.S. There by this afternoon. That's why we have these winter storm warnings. A lot of vorticity advection ahead of this system. A lot of westerly flow, strong winds up there at the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevadas. And here's this upper level low just spinning over the coastline of Louisiana. And this upper level low is going to protect much of the central Gulf Coast from an impact of Hurricane Eta. And that's good news because the Louisiana coastline had an impact from like 4 tropical cyclones. You had Sally, Zeta, as well further east with impacts across coastal Mississippi and Alabama. So this upper level low is at least going to prevent this part of the coastline likely from seeing Eta impacts. But there you can see Tropical Storm Eta now in the western Caribbean, very warm waters lifting off to the northeast ahead of this upper level low. And then it's going to bend back to the west because of the influence of that upper level low and a solidification of that anticyclone over the southwest Atlantic there. I guess you could call that the west central North Atlantic. But this upper level low is just going to sit there and spin, and eventually it's going to push off to the east ahead of this big time trough that's dominating the west coast by this evening with that winter storm warning. And we're going to look at the snowfall totals from all the different models across the Mountain West from this system that basically becomes a bowling ball hammering the central Sierra Nevadas there with snowfall. Good news because of how dry it's been throughout the summer with that wildfire threat as well. This pattern shift with these troughs moving in across the western U.S. is definitely a very good thing for the wildfires out there. Basically shutting them down across the mountains of Colorado. Thankfully, visibility has improved incredibly as well across Colorado. Observing that bobcat yesterday off Arrowhead Golf Course was an incredible treat, coming in up within about 6 feet of us. Very tame out there at the golf course because I think the animals and the wildlife know that people are just out there to golf and that they're basically safe out there from humans. But here you can see that upper level low by late tonight, Saturday morning, still sitting here spinning over the, basically centered over Sabine Pass, the border between Texas and Louisiana there. You can see further intensification over the western Caribbean of Tropical Storm Eta on approach to western and central Cuba there. And look at this upper level low, almost gaining a negative tilt ahead of this trough that's diving south throughout the west coast. And should see a consolidation of the anticyclone or the subtropical ridge off the coast of the southeast. This upper level low will slowly move off to the east, and that's going to encourage that northwestern steering current in between that upper level low along the west side of that subtropical ridge, and should pass over the Florida Keys or South Florida late Sunday night and then meander into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, where it could further intensify into a Cat 1 hurricane before making landfall there in South Florida. But here you can see Tropical Storm Eta by midday tomorrow. On Saturday, it's going to be closing in on central Cuba. We've got this upper level low attaining a negative tilt as it's beginning to get picked up by this trough in the polar front jet stream there. That trough is going to shear up and over top that subtropical ridge that has been so strong this entire tropical season, preventing the recurve of those hurricanes off to the north, where they usually pass near Bermuda or between Bermuda and the east coast. But this subtropical ridge has been incredibly strong across the northern Gulf of Mexico, the southeast, and the western Atlantic. And that's allowed for these tropical systems to really organize at the last second across the Gulf of Mexico. And here you can see that upper level low continuing to encourage that northwest steering current, the weakness in between that upper level low and this consolidating high over the mid-Atlantic. That's going to encourage that northwestern turn Sunday night into Monday across South Florida. Miami, you could get an impact from a pretty substantial tropical cyclone as well, as by Sunday evening, the models are showing Eta here pretty close to the Bahamas, very warm waters here between Cuba and Florida, and beginning that northwestward turn. I could easily see this thing coming in to Miami Sunday night as a pretty stout, intensifying tropical cyclone. That upper level low is all but absent now, almost wrapping around this pocket around Tropical Cyclone Eta. Look at this trough really dominating, swinging to the south toward the Four Corners region. That's how we have winter storm watches out across the San Juans, also across Montana for this lead wave. And I do expect winter storm alerts to come out across the rest of the Mountain West for that big trough diving off to the southeast. We'll look at those snowfall totals as well. But here on Monday morning, there's going to be nasty weather across South Florida with a pretty stout, strong tropical storm, maybe a low-end hurricane across South Florida, doing that northwesterly turn ahead of this next trough. And when this big trough moves into the central U.S., it's going to kick Eta off to the northeast, back across the Florida Peninsula, maybe as a high-end tropical storm, maybe as a low-end hurricane once again, maybe as a hybrid system between a tropical and an extratropical system as this gets picked up and lifted off to the northeast. But the GFS has a pretty intense tropical cyclone moving back across the Florida Peninsula through the middle of next week. So this is Tuesday morning, and the GFS still has Eta offshore, just off Tampa there, likely hammering Tampa with multiple rounds of tidal flooding, storm surge as well. We're going to document that with the Surgeonator sensors. And then this big trough comes in here middle of next week, basically giving Eta no choice but to lift off to the northeast ahead of it. But look at this vortex weaken as it shears out over top this powerful subtropical ridge. That's basically what's been shutting off the fall severe weather season across the central U.S. as well. You normally want these troughs to intensify as they eject across the central U.S., gaining a neutral and negative tilt as they move across Dixie Alley to realize that tornado threat. But these systems are basically reaching max intensity across the Mountain West and then shearing out over top of this ridge. We'll see if this trough is strong enough to pick up Eta, or if Eta is just going to sit out there and meander across the eastern Gulf of Mexico, just dominating the west coast of Florida. Eventually, though, this pattern shift likely going to be the beginning of winter here across the Mountain West. I know that Keystone Ski Area opening day is today. Probably just a few runs open out there. It's supposed to be like 80 degrees down here at the lower elevations in Colorado. but this pattern shift is looking quite favorable for the beginning of ski season across the Mountain West. And we've still got Tropical Cyclone Eta. This is by Wednesday afternoon, still over the west coast of Florida, maybe just offshore, likely maintaining its intensity. Round after round of tornadoes and waterspouts expected with those outer bands. And eventually this trough, look at this trough just die out as it lifts into eastern Canada, as this subtropical ridge is really dominating out there. And it's possible that Eta could just kind of weaken in this increasing wind shear ahead of this trough across the western U.S. Even though they are shearing out over top this subtropical ridge, there should be some wind shear and some unfavorable conditions for this tropical cyclone. And it'll probably reinvigorate over the Gulf Stream as it lifts northeast out ahead of this evolving trough across the central U.S. And then look at all these systems coming in with northwesterly flow into the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast. These are going to bring more snowfall across the Mountain West. Could be an early start to winter out here, and a decent pattern with all this warm water across the northeastern Pacific. I think we're going to see that ridge axis center further west across the eastern Pacific. That should allow these disturbances to develop over the Gulf of Alaska, surge southeast, gain intensity, and then gain amplitude as they come ashore across the Mountain West, and eventually bring quite a bit of snowfall across those western and northwestern facing slopes in the Rockies, including the Colorado Rockies, and then lifting up into eastern Canada as the subtropical ridge continues to dominate downstream there in the Atlantic. And that's why you definitely don't want to just look at the sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific like La Nina or El Nino when you're making a wintertime forecast, or especially into the spring. But the rest of the ocean basins matter too. The subtropics, you got the Pacific Decadal Oscillation existing in a horseshoe out there. I called it the PDO horseshoe in my PhD dissertation out there. And you definitely got a subtropical extension of those anomalies that are definitely associated with each other. And you've got a lot of warm water across the extratropical branch of the PDO horseshoe as well, and quite a bit of warm water across that subtropical branch. And then it flips over to La Nina conditions in the tropical Pacific. But those warm anomalies in the extratropical Pacific are going to matter. There's an intermodulation between the atmospheric conditions that happen over top those sea surface temperatures, with the ocean temperatures evolving a little bit more slowly than the overlying atmosphere, and that should create the ridge axis to center a little further west across the northeastern Pacific, with these disturbances and storm systems lifting around the northeastern side of that disturbance, dropping southeast into the northern Rockies, ushering in cold air intrusions from Canada, and should get a pretty decent ski season across the central and northern Rockies, Sierra Nevadas, and the Pacific Northwest from this pattern, assuming that it continues through the rest of winter. And maybe be a pattern shift by next spring with a La Nina spring. I think 2021 is going to be incredibly active. For severe weather, the opposite of this year. So now let's look at a couple of these other forecast models. This is on the Tropical Tidbits website. This is by Levi Cohen. Makes these incredible model displays available. This is shows all the different GFS ensemble members here, and the orange and reds are a stronger tropical cyclone. So the GFS is definitely trending toward a stronger tropical storm, maybe even a hurricane, with impacts across southern and western Florida as early as Sunday night, Monday morning, possibly impacting Miami down through the Florida Keys, and then passing back out over the open eastern Gulf of Mexico, where it could maintain intensity through the middle portion of next week, before lifting off to the northeast and maybe passing back across the Florida Peninsula. And there's even a couple members that have that influence of the upper level low so great that it curves Eta back to the southwest and potentially could make landfall down in the northern Yucatan as even a strong tropical cyclone. So a lot of different scenarios are still possible. Even attack way off to the east across the Bahamas, and then a curvature back in toward Miami as well. But a lot of uncertainty still exists with this forecast track. A lot of agreement, though, on this northeastward progression and gradual intensification into a tropical storm on approach to central Cuba this weekend. Should be some weakening of Eta before re-emerging here in the warm waters between South Florida and Cuba. And then we should begin that westward, northwestward turn because of the influence of that upper level low here over southern Louisiana, which should help to save the central Gulf of Mexico from yet another impact or another tropical cyclone landfall up there. Hurricane models are in basic agreement with that northwestward turn across South Florida here in 72 to 96 hours. Sunday night into Monday, that looks like that's going to happen. And then passing back into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, where there could be some reinvigoration of that tropical cyclone. And then a turn back to the northeast appears possible by the middle of next week. But it's going to be an active early next to middle portion of next week across southern and the western coast of Florida. Probably landfalling water spouts out there, storm surges across multiple tidal cycles, big time rain as well. We'll assess those rainfall totals in the models. And we're going to assess the snowfall totals in the models as well. Hurricane intensity models basically keep this as a strong tropical storm into a low-end hurricane. There is that one outlier that rapidly intensifies the hurricane, but you can throw that out. Basically looks like a strong tropical storm, maybe a low-end hurricane appears likely. And as I mentioned, there are some winter weather alerts across the west coast ahead of that system that we just identified. Mountains of and the high plains of Montana here have winter storm watches. That's going to impact southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan as well. The pink shows those winter storm warnings in the central, even southern Sierra Nevadas. Here are those winter storm watches across the Colorado San Juans. Some winter storm watches as well across the higher terrain there of northwestern Arizona, as that system is expected to bomb down to the south like a bowling ball, bringing more snowfall across the southern Rockies as opposed to the central and northern Rockies like we've seen before. But let's take a look at some of these snowfall models a little bit more in detail. There we go. So we've broken down how the parent upper level system is expected to evolve, at least in the GFS model. So let's take a look at the GFS model through about 120 hours. These are the snow maps. This is the fun part. And here's that lead trough lifting northeast across the upper Great Lakes into eastern Canada. And there's probably going to be quite a bit of snow out there. Look at the San Juans. Could get a couple feet of snow up there, 2 to 3 feet from this system. That's why you got those winter storm watches across there. Could easily get 6 to 12 inches across the Cascades. And look at this dominant swath of snow across the high plains extending east of the northern Rockies. And that's why there's a winter storm watch as well across central northern Montana, even into southern Alberta, Saskatchewan. Sean, it looks like the swath of heaviest snow could be just to your north, but you're going to get some decent snow up there as well to the east of Regina, Melville area, but that main track's going to be to the north of Yorkton, across the northern portion of Lakes Winnipeg and Manitoba up there. Quite a bit of snow, it looks like, is going to happen in the mountains to the southwest of Calgary. 6 to 12 inches, though, could easily fall in Calgary. And this is the GFS model, just one of the models there. Let's take a look now at the European model, and these are just snow maps. And one thing the GFS and the European shows are the San Juans absolutely getting pounded by this. Wolf Creek, Colorado, you're going to be happy, and a lot of this is because of that trough kind of closing out here, at least reaching max intensity down near the Four Corners, taking that southern track. You can see the mountains there, southwestern Utah, outside of Zion, also going to get hammered by over a foot of snow. Decent snowfall as well for the mountains outside of Salt Lake City, 6 to 12 inches. The European has even up to 2 feet of snow falling here across the high plains of north central Montana, the higher terrain around Glacier National Park, and in agreement with the ejection of that surface low northeast over top of that subtropical ridge that's dominating the eastern U.S. and western Canada. Should have known that was going to happen, and it was going to shut down the tornado threat for the southern plains of this system. I know we were talking about the potential for tornadoes across the southern plains early part of next week, but it's just not going to happen out there. Looking at some of the NAM. I think a certainty is that the San Juans are going to get 3 to 4 feet of snow from this system through early next week. and that's why you got those winter storm watches out there. The mountains along I-70 also could get in excess of a foot, 1 to 2 feet up there as well. This is the NAM model. And it looks like even though there's a winter storm warning across the Sierra Nevadas, may not be as much snow out there, possibly up to a foot, but I bet there's going to be some higher amounts in those higher ridges and peaks out there in the Sierra Nevadas, outside of Truckee, outside of Lake Tahoe. But definitely all the models are in agreement with the San Juans just getting hammered by this system. 2, 3, 4 feet of snow from this. So it looks like the San Juans are going to be the winner. Wolf Creek ski area, I heard that they opened for some early powder days, so we'll probably reopen so you can get some fresh runs on some fresh powder out there. Here at Gizmo, going crazy outside. A lot of that's because of the person above me. Likes to walk really loud all day long up there. It's not good for the knees to walk like that. When you lock your knees and slam on the floor like that, definitely not good for the knees. That's why I like to glide across the floor, almost like a skipping motion. Cross-country ski, Nordic track type of a walk, I think is better for the knees. But the NAM is definitely showing quite a bit of snowfall there. San Juan, southwestern Colorado, even portions of northern Colorado are going to get a lot of snow from this system. Severe weather, though, is not going to be an issue. Eta is going to be an issue down here across South Florida, eastern Gulf of Mexico. We're going to be watching that closely for Surgeonator deployment. Let's pull up the satellite again one more time. Take a look at Eta dominating over the warm waters of the Western Caribbean. Most of the models show a reinvigoration of the system. I wouldn't be surprised if Eta ends up reforming a little further southeast underneath where this maximum latent heat release is happening with that convection. Looks like there could be a closed circulation a little further south of that track. That would bring Eta back on shore to the north of central Cuba, and then over the western Bahamas, and then maybe give it more time over that warm water to the southeast of Florida to the north of Cuba before beginning that northwestward turn, potentially impacting Miami as a stout, strong tropical storm, maybe a low-end hurricane up there. But you definitely can see center trying to consolidate a little further to the southeast. Let's look at visible satellite. Maybe we can see if there's a decoupling or just a little bit of a tilting of the system between the low-level center and the convection aloft. So really what you have here are a couple different convective blobs. You've got this convective blob on the backside of the system. This is likely a little closer to where the low-level center is located. And then you've got this new convective explosion to the southeast of the center. And it's still too early to tell which one will dominate. There's a chance that this convection just coming off the coast of Central America there off Belize could release enough latent heat to kind of keep that center further north. Or it's possible that this blob off to the southeast of the center could dominate, and that could lead to reformation of Eta a little bit further south of that forecast track. But really time will tell. We just have to watch this tropical depression. It is forecast to be a tropical storm by the next update. Low-end tropical storm as it accelerates off to the northeast. But Cuba, tropical storm watches are in effect central western Cuba. That includes the Havana area, and then a northwestward turn is expected. Looks like we got a special marine warning there for the Everglades as we have some convection moving east to west across South Florida. National Weather Service tracking a gusty shower 9 miles west of Shark Valley Observation Tower. So that's in the middle of the Everglades there. Beautiful Everglades across southwestern Florida. But definitely got to keep an eye on that. A lot of times there's convection here in these outer bands well ahead of Eta. In fact, those are just standard showers out there happening. But we'll keep an eye on Eta. I think we're deployment across South Florida, maybe on a Sunday morning flight out there into Miami, seems likely, and then chasing it up through the west coast of Florida through the middle of next week, deploying the network of surgeonators, expecting to go over the surgeonator preliminary data today as well, and we'll keep posting that data as we finalize that storm surge depth for the Buras area. But we were able to pull off 3 to 4 hours of additional data on Surgeonator 3 and 4 from the Zeta deployment, and still pulling off data from Surgeonator 4 as well. So thank you guys for joining me for my weather report this morning. I'll keep these coming. And stay tuned for updates here with Eta, live storm chasing as well. Please consider following the Facebook supporter community. That helps make these live briefings possible. I'm going to be sending some educational content through my social media networks throughout this winter as well, starting this month, later on this month, once the hurricane season finally starts to come to a close. So please consider following the Facebook supporter community. Makes all of our Team Dominator science possible, the live storm chasing possible, these live briefings, and I'm just going to continue using that as a home for this content, weather briefings and storm chasing content. But thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your Friday, and have a great weekend. And I'm going to continue these weather briefings through this weekend as we hone our intercept plan for Tropical Cyclone Eta.